So we're going to talk about using the quadratic formula today. The bell ringer, just identifying solutions. Remember, you can always graph that. You're looking for the rocks when it talks about solutions. We've talked about lots of ways to find solutions, graphing. We talked about the square root method. If you are unsure, we also talked about the snowflake and setting those factors equal to 0. But the quadratic formula will work all of the time. So if you are unsure, this definitely works all of the time. Especially if you cannot use the snowflake or factor or square root method, right? If neither of those will work, especially, and the square root method will not work if you have a b. So sometimes we can use the snowflake when we have a b. The quadratic formula is on your formula chart, right? X equals, so we're looking for X. This is going to be your rocks because we're assuming that Y is 0, right? And it's a very long formula, but it is not hard to use. I know it looks a little intimidating, but again, you don't have to memorize it. You can simply put it in to the formula and use your calculator. Put the quadratic equation in standard form. So if it is not already equal to 0, you're going to have to do that. Find A, B, and C, put them in the formula. So just a little bit of practice. Find the A, find the B, find the C. So the A, when there's no number, it's a 1. The B is -2, C is 48, where A is always in front of x squared, B is always in front of x, and C is always that number that's by itself, the constant. So here 2, -15. We don't have a C here, so C is just 0. 4 is not set equal to 0, so we're going to have to move this 5 over first, and we get 10x squared. 19 minus 5 is a -24. So we do not have a B in this case. And so you could try the square root method on this if you wanted, but again, quadratic formula will work every single time. So now that we're comfortable identifying A, B, and C, let's plug some numbers in. A is 1, B is 2, C is -15, and I've been doing this a long time, but I still label my A, B, and C. Over here on your paper, you do have that formula. So it says B is negative. So our B happens to be 2. So we're going to write -2. There's that plus or minus we talked about. The square root. Now, always, when we're squaring things, put them in parentheses. So b squared, so b is 2 minus 4. The 4 is part of the formula. A is 1. C is -15. All of that goes underneath our square root, all over 2 times A, which is 1. So now we're going to start simplifying, and you're going to want to definitely have your calculator to do this. So I'm going to write -2 plus or minus. Now, all of this math for our square root can go in the calculator. You can use your yellow calculator. You can use your Desmos calculator. So if I'm going to use my Desmos calculator, I'm going to say parentheses 2, close parentheses squared. Always put it in parentheses when you're squaring it. -4 times 1 times -15. And we get, as you can see there, 64. So I'm going to come back over here. I'll put my 64. 2 times 1 I know is 2. Remember we talked about in the square root method simplifying. So I can simplify 64. So I have -2 plus or minus 64. The square root of 64 is 8 over 2. Now we talked about you have a plus and a minus symbol. So this is really two separate problems. I have 2 plus 8 divided by 2. So I'm going to have to solve that one. And then I'm sorry, -2 plus 8 divided by 2. And I need to do -2 minus 8 divided by 2. And again, you can go to your calculator to do that, right? So you can say -2 plus 8 going to put that in parentheses all over 2. And then I've got 3, and then I can even go up and I can edit this to be -2 minus 8. So I got 3 and I got -5. So I can write 3, -5, and those are my roots. And if I was unsure, I could go back and I could graph this to double check. So if I said x squared plus 2x minus 15, and I can see right here, -5 and +3. So you can always check your work for quadratic formula. All right, this next one is a little bit tricky. So hang with me. So our A is -2. Always start with identifying that. -4, +3. We're going to plug this in. Now, B is already negative. So I have negative, and then I have B. So we know a negative becomes a positive. Plus or minus square root, and we're just plugging those numbers into our formula. Parentheses, always put it in parentheses, whether it's positive or negative. -4 squared minus 4 from our formula. A is a -2, and C is 3. All over 2 times A. So now that we've got it set up, the setting up is not hard. Now we need to simplify. So I have 4 plus or minus, and I'm going to put that in my calculator. Again, you can use your Desmos for that if you would like. So, or your yellow calculator if you have that. So we're going to say parentheses, -4, close parentheses, squared, minus 4 times -2 times 3, we get 40. All over -4. Now, sometimes you can stop here, especially if it's multiple choice. Sometimes they won't simplify any further. But if they do not have that as a choice, if it goes further, you can use your menu 2, 3, and you can simplify that square root like we talked about yesterday. So this simplifies to 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. So remember, pairs go in and singles stay out. So I'm going to come over here. I have a little bit more room. And I'm going to write, just draw my little arrow so we know where it came from. So we have 4 plus or minus 2 on the square root of 10. That came from down here. 2 times 2, we write that pair once. All over our -4. So, and sometimes they'll do this part. Sometimes you can stop here. You just have to decide looking at those multiple choice answers. If that is still not an answer, then you need to simplify everything that is not in the radical. So think about, what is the GCF of 4 and 2 and 4? Well, 2, because they're all even. So I'm going to have to say, okay, well, 4 divided by 2, this becomes a 2. Plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1. Now, we don't typically write the 1 in front of the square root. I'm going to do it as a dot so you know it's there. The 10 stays as 10. We never mess with that radical. 2 goes into -4, -2 times. And this is our answer. Now, usually you don't have to simplify that far down. Usually, if you get to here, you're good. Sometimes it'll make you get to here. Usually you don't have to go all the way down. So just check the multiple choice. All right. Let's look at 3. So my A is 2 and my B is 3. But look, this is not equal to 0. I'm going to have to move my 2 over to make that in standard form, because you don't want to mess with anything until it's equal to 0. Because what we're doing there, we're saying y is 0. That's why we're finding our roots, x-intercept solution zeros. So now we can plug this in. Remember, always, whatever b is, you're going to change that sign. -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times 2. So now we can simplify. And again, you're using that calculator, -3 plus or minus. When I put this in my calculator, I get 25, which is a very nice number for square roots, all over 4. So I can simplify this. I have -3 plus or minus. The square root of 25 is 5 over 4. So now I have two problems to work, right? I'm going to have -3 plus 5 divided by 4, and I'm going to have -3 minus 5 divided by 4. And when I put those into the calculator, which you can do, I get 1/2 or 0.5, and I get -2. So again, you can definitely graph that to double check those answers. Number 4 is also not in standard form. So I'm going to have to move these things over here. So this equals 0. So I have 6x squared plus 3x plus 7 equals 0. So now I can see my A is 6 and my B is 3 and my C is 7. Negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A is 6 times C is 7, all over 2 times A. Using your calculator, put in that big giant piece underneath the square root right here. So we get -3, don't forget your negative, -3 plus or minus. When I put that in the calculator, I get a -159 over 12. And we learned yesterday that when you take the square root of a negative, that means there are no roots. So actually, we are done now. If you weren't sure, if you're like second guessing yourself, definitely go to your Desmos and graph it in standard form. You can't graph it with that equals and the numbers on both sides. So plus 3x minus 7. And remember we said, oh, I put -7. It should have been plus. I apologize. Plus 7. So notice it's way up here above the x-axis. So that is why there are no roots. There are no x-intercepts, okay? So I'm going to ask you to try number 5. Sorry. And 6 and 7 on the back. I will have the PDF answer key posted for you in Google Classroom to check that, but I do want you to try to do those.